This episode brought to you by TAUMMHOMS, which is a natural sleep and sound healing portal helping people globally to get to sleep faster and stay asleep longer through TAUMMHOMS.com. That's www.TAUMMHOMS.com.
It's My Right Stuff with your host, Grammy Award-winning record producer and inventor, Toby Wright. I'm your announcer, Grinnin' Barrett. Here's Toby.
Hey, and welcome back to My Right Stuff, which is a film, TV, sports, music, and adventure lifestyle podcast. I'm your host, Lord Toby Wright, and on today's podcast, we have a very good friend of mine for many, many years, Mistress Carrie, formerly an on-air personality at WAAF in Boston. And if you're not familiar with that station, they were on the cutting edge of radio and breaking rock bands for almost 50 years. On today's show, we're going to try a little different format. We're going to attempt to interview each other at the same time. She's going to ask me some questions, and I'm going to ask her some questions, so it should be a lot of fun. Well, but first, I want to thank you, all of our supporters, who stream, download, watch, and support My Right Stuff. Keep spreading the word. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Be sure to click on our show notes below and follow our link tree for a full list of all the channels we're streaming on, as well as our sites and social media platforms. Also, if you're able, please follow our support link to donate to My Right Stuff. Every single dollar helps support My Right Stuff crew, who make all of this possible. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as the podcast channel of your choice, so you never miss a single episode. Please head on over to myrightstuff.com, go to the store tab, and pick up some snazzy merch for those bodies, too. Well, on today's podcast, my guest is Mistress Carrie. Formerly a DJ at WAAF in Boston for almost 30 years, please give a nice, warm My Right Stuff welcome to Mistress Carrie.
I get to see yours and you get to see mine.
Exactly. Ooh.
This is MCHQ.
MCHQ, all right.
That's what I call it. Ouch, I just banged my knee. Fuck.
They got to raise the desk then.
I know. No, there's a rack underneath here that I need to relocate because it hurts.
It's not where you're supposed to keep your rack.
I know.
Ha, ha, ha.
I know where it goes, Toby.
All right. How are we going to start this off?
Didn't we start it already?
Yeah, I guess we did, right?
We started, right? Or we're on the record now.
We're on the record. We're actually recording. Hi.
It's so good to see you.
Good to see you, too. It's great to hook up in Nashville and get reacquainted again after so many years. And
I know. It's been forever. And when I saw that you were going to be at Rockin' Pod, I was like, oh, my God, I'm hanging out with Toby when I'm in Nashville.
And I thought the same. I thought, oh, man. And then I looked at my schedule and it was like, oh, yes, she requested me. All right. Because if not, I was going to come by your table and, annihilate you anyway. So.
Yeah, I was expecting it. I looked down the list of all of the people that were going to be there and I was like, oh, okay, well, do I need to request an interview to sit down with Toby? I know the guy, but I'll just write down that I need to talk to him anyway, just to get on his very busy schedule.
Yeah, right. My very busy schedule. But that was fun, though. So, I really did appreciate us not having an interview in that very loud room for the 15 minutes that we were allotted, because I think that we have a lot more important things to say than we could have covered then.
Yeah, I mean, it's, the thing that I love so much about the podcast, I don't know about you, because this is the first time that I've done an episode where we were interviewing each other. So if I start taking over, just tell me to knock it off.
Okay.
But But the thing that I love about it is like doing radio interviews, you're always cognizant of the time, because
Right.
you got to get into a song or get into commercials. You need to stay on time. And with podcasts, you can have a more relaxed conversation and really either A, get to know the person way better, or B, in our case, be able to go way back and tell some funny stories because we've known each other for so long.
Exactly. That's the beauty of the podcasting thing, because we're not tight to the clock, as it were.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's see.
And we can always go back and edit stuff, which you can't do when your ass is hanging out live on the radio.
Amen. That must have been quite an interesting experience to be live on the radio. I mean, I've done a few interviews live on the radio, but to be a DJ, like, I guess you get used to it, right? After a while, just being live and what not to say, what to say.
I've been doing it so long that I don't even think twice about it anymore. Mentally, what helped me, and it was always something I had the bands do when they came into the studio with me.
Right.
I used the headphones as like a physical reminder that I was live.
Okay.
Because you've spent enough time with me off the air that I swear like a truck driver.
Right.
So for me, the idea of putting on the headphones was like a physical reminder that I was live.
Okay.
And so it kind of made my brain shift to make sure that like I'm in work mode and I don't swear when I'm in work mode. I've only slipped a couple times. Joey Kramer from Aerosmith got me to slip once. I said bullshit live on the air.
Uh-oh.
And he almost fell over laughing so hard because we were just sitting there having a conversation like you and I are, but we were face to face in my studio and we were laughing about something. And I was like, that's bullshit. And you know it. And he just looked at me and went, oh, and I went, oh my God. And I went lunging after the dump button, which is the button when you're on a delay. You're still live, but there's like a 7-second delay.
Right.
And the button says dump on it. And I went lunging for the dump button. And I think I got the bullshit off the air. So
that's good. Well,
I was okay. But
if you didn't get a fine, then I guess you did, right?
Well, the thing with an FCC fine is that somebody has to not only hear it, but then they have to care enough to complain and like file a complaint with the FCC.
Oh, okay.
And the good thing about rock and roll audiences, or at least rock radio audiences for the most part, they're not going to complain about that.
They don't give a shit, right?
They thought it was funny.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
So no, I never got in trouble.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, you're at a WAAF in Boston for like almost 30 years, right? And in that time,
29 years.
29 years. So in that time, you were the pioneer driving rock music in the greater Boston area. No doubt about it. And you're self-described as a Harley rider, a licensed skydiver, a pug owner, Boston Marathon tough ruck finisher, an amateur marksman, military supporter, whose call sign is Narco, veterans advocate, a guest lecturer, a motivational speaker, a baker, a gardener, and an all-around thrill seeker. The first thing I need to ask you is, what is a Boston Marathon tough ruck finisher? I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, so I ran the Boston Marathon once.
Okay.
I finished, I ran it in 2019. So it was like the last marathon that happened before the pandemic. But if you remember back at the Boston Marathon bombing.
I do.
I've been going to the Boston Marathon since I was a kid, because if you grow up in the Boston area, they call it Marathon Monday.
Right.
Marathon Monday happens on Patriots Day, which is a state holiday, which marks the first shot of the American Revolution, the shot heard around the world. So it's that weekend in April.
Okay.
And so going to college, whatever, it's a huge party day because half the roads in the city are closed. It's a state holiday, so everybody day drinks. There's usually a Red Sox game. It's crazy. Hundreds of thousands of people everywhere.
Cool.
And then when I started on the air, I was always broadcasting from somewhere along the finish line. So the Boston Marathon is like, it's just part of your thing when you grow up around here.
Okay.
And the year the bombing happened, and before, there were military personnel that would start the marathon early in the morning before the runners would start, and they would wear full battle rattle. So 50 pounds of gear, uniforms, combat boots, and they would ruck march the marathon route.
Okay.
And because they would leave really early in the morning, by the time they rucked to the finish, it would be the height of when the runners, the elite runners, would be crossing the finish line. And you see all these soldiers in full battle rattle rounding the corner from Hereford onto Boylston Street, and the place goes crazy.
Wow.
So if you go back and look at the pictures of the bombing at the Boston Marathon, you're going to see guys in Army uniforms. Those guys were there because they just finished rucking the marathon with 50 plus pounds of gear on their back. And that's why they were there, because they had just finished it. So the year after the bombing, the Tough Ruck was going to continue, and they did it for charity. And Homeland Security and everything made the determination that the ruck themselves, the backpacks, didn't meet the security protocols. They couldn't be on the course because of the bombing.
Okay.
So the BAA, the Boston Athletic Association, I know this is a long story, but I'll tell you anyway.
Keep going.
So they had the BAA went out and marked a route that's equivalent to the Boston Marathon that is along the Battle Road Trail in Lexington and Concord, where the actual revolutionaries fought the Redcoats.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so you are rucking 26.2 miles with your rucksacks on, but you're just not allowed. And it happens the weekend before Marathon Monday now. And it's to raise money for veterans charities. And so the year after the bombing, they were only going to let active duty military do it. And they bent the rules a little bit to let me ruck with the guys I had been embedded in Afghanistan and Iraq with and do the ruck with them. And so I did the Boston Marathon 4 times as a rucker, wearing 50 pounds on my back in combat boots.
Wow.
And then the 5th year, I ran it on the actual course because it was a bucket list thing that I had always, every single person that's gotten drunk and watched the Boston Marathon has said out loud at one point or another, someday I'm going to run it.
Right.
And I just was like, I'm just going to do it. So I've done the Boston Marathon 5 times. I did the Tough Ruck 4 times and then ran it once.
That's absolutely amazing. I had no idea that.
Physically, the Tough Ruck is harder.
Right.
Mentally, the marathon is harder.
Okay.
Because the ruck, at least you're there with a bunch of other people embracing the suck together. Whereas when you're running, even if you're with a team, any runner knows like it's kind of you against your own brain.
Right. Exactly.
And when I ran the marathon, it was cold and windy, and then it got really hot. Like we went through everything but snow and locusts in the time that I was on the course. And it was miserable and horrible, and I was afraid I wasn't going to finish. And the radio station was broadcasting live from the finish line. So I had to finish because I would have looked like an idiot live on the radio if I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
We raised a bunch of money. And so, yeah, I'm very proud of the fact that I did the ruck 4 times, finished it all 4 times, and then ran the marathon and finished it once.
That's fantastic. I'm very proud of you, actually. That's great.
Thank you.
I don't think I could do that. I don't think my health would.
Yeah, you could.
I don't know.
I'm not healthy either. You know what it is? It's a mental thing. And I learned a lot about myself, and the lessons I learned on the course of either the ruck or the marathon I've carried through. They were really hard life lessons. And that was, your brain is capable of way more than you think that you can handle.
Okay.
And you're a lot stronger than you think you can be when you need to be. And for me, what motivated me was getting angry.
Okay.
Like, I can do anything if I'm pissed off.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I got mad at the course. I got mad at, the Tough Ruck, you wear ribbons on your rucksack that commemorate. The whole point of wearing the ruck is you're carrying it for someone that is not here anymore to carry it themselves.
Right.
So it commemorates fallen soldiers, fallen police officers, fallen firefighters, fallen EMS workers. And so it's really hard to quit when the person in front of you has got 10 names of people that aren't here anymore.
Yeah, okay.
That died in the line of duty.
Right.
Like, you find a new place in your brain. And those life lessons have helped me through personal stuff, the professional stuff I've gone through after the radio station went off the air, like that mental kind of toughness. Those lessons were hard learned, but incredibly life transforming for me.
I bet. I mean, I have chills all over my body as you're telling me this. right now.
Well, you've gone through a lot physically too, though. Like I didn't know about your accident until you and I sat down at Rockin' Pod. Like, I had no idea that you had been injured, and coming back from serious injury is something that requires that mental toughness. It's the same thing.
Oh, for sure. And it took me a long time to heal, and I don't consider myself 100% healed, but, other people look at me and go, damn, dude, you're doing great, so it's all about.
Yeah, you could. So will you tell me what happened real quick? Just, you don't have to get into the gory medical stuff, but like you got into a vehicle accident, right?
Yeah, I got into a car accident in Topanga Canyon out here in California. I was on my way home from a Hollywood Records something. It was a meeting, I think. And I got sandwiched. Some lady jammed on her brakes in front of me. I jammed on the brakes. I stopped, and then I got hit from behind from a lady in an SUV who was on her phone, and then consequently, my car was an accordion. She pushed me into the car in front of me, and so on and so forth. They had to take me out through the sunroof. Anyway, they took me out through the sunroof. They took me to the hospital, and I couldn't feel the right side of my body, and it was like I was numb. So after that, I went to all these doctors and all that stuff, and they said, I can't help you, but here's a prescription. And I didn't take them because I was numb, and I don't need pain medication for, a numb right side of my body. So it turned out to be nerve damage, and I ended up going on the internet and figuring out that there was this thing called sound healing that ended up helping me greatly after I made a bunch of different what I call tonalities and things like that. And it was, it just helped me come back and in my sleep. So and I started a company all about it called TAUMMHOMS, and we can talk about that later. But
yeah, any kind of injury, I think it doesn't matter if it's a sports injury, if it's a vehicle injury, if it's some kind of a diagnosis, like a cancer diagnosis, when you're fighting your own body, you have to find a place in your brain that allows you to fight through it. And that, I don't know where that place in your brain is, but once you tap into that strength that you have that you didn't know you had, it's almost like anything is possible.
No, you're right. I mean, I was in another accident when I was 17 that required, I had a bunch of broken bones and things, and that was another vehicle accident, and that was really bad. And so that one required a lot of mental. Okay, kid, you can do this. Yes, you can walk again. They told me I'd never walk again. Like, what? Of course I'm going to walk again. I'm friggin' 17 years old. I got a whole life ahead of me. No, sorry, your hips and your pelvis are too shattered. No, they're not. Watch. And I did. I learned how to walk in a pool.
Yeah, and that's
the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm talking about. Or it's like, I do a lot of work with like injured veterans and stuff, and they say that they just have to say, like, tell me I can't do something.
Right.
It's almost like you need that negative person in your life to tell you can't do that, to be motivated to do it. Like, I love the word no.
Right.
Because it's so motivating.
Absolutely.
And like I didn't know that you had been injured as a kid because I was born with a tethered spinal cord.
Okay.
And I had all kinds of nerve damage on the left side of my body growing up. And had I not had the surgeries I had before I stopped growing, they said I would be in a wheelchair by the time I went to my senior prom, and I would be dead by the time I was 30. So to me, that's what I was thinking about, running for the hospital that saved my life.
Amen.
Finishing the Boston Marathon when I wasn't even supposed to be alive if it wasn't for that hospital. So it's like, you have to come through that stuff,
Amen. God, it gave me chills everywhere. God damn it. No, that's.
We're gonna start a self-help series, Toby. We're just gonna.
I think we are. Yeah, we're leaning in that direction.
By the end of this podcast, people are going to be signing up to run marathons across the country.
That's right. with the strength to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I want to know. I want to know from you. I ask this a lot from musicians and stuff.
Okay.
There's two eras in music in your adolescence, at least that I've been able to identify.
Okay.
There's the music you inherit that you're taught by your family, your mom, your dad, your older brothers, the cool uncle. And then there's a line in the sand where you discover your music and go, no, this is what I like. And that becomes your kind of musical identity. So because you do what you do, music has had to have been a part of your life growing up. So what was the music that you got gifted? And then what was the music that you discovered that was yours?
Okay. That's pretty easy, actually. So the music I got gifted was by my dad. He ran Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts for a while. He was a professional saxophone player, and he was, just into the music. And so he had me playing flute and clarinet and a bunch of woodwind instruments. And
wait, you played clarinet too?
Yeah, man, that's what the book teeth are for.
Hell yeah, dude. You're the first clarinet player I've had on the show. Me too.
All right.
Nice. All right. Sorry to interrupt. You're a woodwind guy.
So
playing the flute, clarinet, all of it.
Yep. And then I tried the trumpet. This didn't have the armature or whatever you call it for it. Didn't have the strength in my face, basically, to hold those notes. Was looking, my dad was a big jazz guy. So, I got into playing some keyboards and, piano and stuff like that. And then that led me, my mom and dad got divorced. And my mom turned into the quintessential groupie / 60s hippie, right? Because I was born in 61, and this was in 1970. I think they got divorced, or maybe even earlier. I was at Woodstock. She was like the whole epitome. My first concert was Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Creedence at the and I know, look at your face, at the Fillmore East in New York. And I was on.
Wait, you went to Woodstock?
I was in Woodstock when I was 7 years old or 8 years old.
I went to 94 and 99, but I did not get to go to 69 because I wasn't born yet.
Yeah.
I can't believe you were there as a kid.
My mom was absolutely crazy, and she just drugged me wherever she went. I went. So that's how I got to go see the shows, that I saw, and got to go see Woodstock as well, because she just dragged me wherever I went. So I'm adopted I'm her kid, but I was adopted by the guy I call Dad, right? The professional saxophone player guy, who I love him as, he is my dad. I don't know anybody else, right? So to answer the question, to get more into the music side of it, I went to college and at NYU, and then I was working at Electric Lady Studios in New York City, and then got sick of New York at 18 and said, you know what, I'm out. And I moved to Los Angeles and joined a couple of teams here and built some studios, and then just started working. And then that's how I found, I think, my music, right? So I think my music was more a guitar style, Southern rocky. I really had a kin to like Skynyrd and, the Allman Brothers and, all that kind of good Southern rock and roll, dating all the way back to, what is now like the Delta blues and stuff like that. Right. And I don't know why, it just kind of turned me on, and that was my shit. And then I got into, producing bands that weren't that. They were completely the opposite. Like when you and I met, it was in like 99, and I was producing Seven Dust's home at, Longview Farm in Massachusetts, right? And so, that stuff is completely different than all that. So, it's completely rhythmic driven, and it's badass, period. All of that I really love too. And so, I don't know, for me, it's a whole plethora of music. It's not just one. I can't just go down one lane. You know what I mean? I got to have it all.
This is the second time that Electric Lady Studios has come up on my podcast, because recently I interviewed Dan Murphy from the band All Good Things.
Okay.
And his aunt and uncle ran that studio.
Who?
I don't know what his aunt and uncle's name is, but he grew up going there because his aunt and uncle worked there and ran it.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know what era, but it came up. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, because even though I'm not in New York, like I know what an important studio that place was and is for music.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Back in the day, Jimmy, he purchased it, and he lived upstairs in an apartment on the third floor, which is now Studio C. And then there was a ballroom, which is Studio A. And the ballroom was underneath, and down in the sub basement, basically. And so, that turned into Studio A. And he purchased the building when he had his first successful recording. And then he named it Electric Lady Studios. And then boom, the whole building was his. And, you go there today, and there used to be a huge mural, all down a big hallway leading back to Studio C or back to Studio B. And they've since, chopped it up and put it in different places. And, it's kind of a shame what they've done. But at the same time, you move on, and some of the mural was sold to people and, all that kind of stuff. So it was a really, really special place to grow up in the music industry.
Music is one of those things where you can love it like I do. I feel like my gift of it is hearing it and kind of knowing if it's good.
Right.
Like I have a lot of bands that will ask me, like, we'll listen to the songs and tell us which ones you think will be successful on the radio and like which ones you like the best. You listen to music with a completely different ear.
Right.
Because you can look at a song like a surgeon and kind of pick it apart piece by piece. How do you realize you have that gift? Because I know I don't have it.
I don't know. I mean, writing songs, it comes to mind. You met my partner earlier, Brian. He and I write songs together. And so we'll pick them apart. And, it just comes from, I think, experience. Like I've spent years and years and years behind the console, making some very important records with some amazing producers. And I love to learn from those guys because, that's where you really learn the chops is from, a mentor. And so I was taught early on that, a mentor should be somebody in your life that, has accomplished way more than you ever want to accomplish. And so I picked out a whole bunch of guys, Ron Nevison, Ted Templeman. Those two men alone taught me so much in the studio. It was just ridiculous, and then obviously I had, other mentors, in bands as well, like Lars Ulrich when Metallica came through. And I did the And Justice for All record. That was a completely different learning experience on how to record. And so, it just all of those things you get to know, like, that feels good going from that verse into that pre-chorus or B section or whatever you want to call it, and then into a chorus. Or let's skip that part and let's go right from the verse right into the chorus because that feels good and it doesn't mess with the story. And so you have to be cognizant when you're picking that shit apart. You have to be very, very cognizant of, are you messing up the story, right? Because you can't just go for the hook and get out. It just doesn't work that way. Even though most listeners today have what they call ADD or ADHD or whatever, and they can't listen for more than 10 seconds, like that's their loss.
Well, like most people that are going to listen to my show know who Lars Ulrich is, obviously. But the guys you're talking about, the mentors you're talking about,
right?
Can you kind of give me a Reader's Digest version of who those guys are and why you chose them as your mentor?
I probably chose them because they were in my studio, and I got to work with them. Ron Nevison is a man who did, oh my God, the Heart Comeback records, and then Bad Animals I did with him. What else did we did like 7 or 8 records together. We did, my goodness, some Survivor, some Triumph, some Patti Smythe, oh my God. That man he did the entire UFO catalog. He worked with Zeppelin back in the day. And so he has so many amazing things to teach you on a daily basis. And just engineering for him and being his assistant, I'd set stuff up and, put a microphone here and, knowing his choice in microphones, I would, put those out and place them wherever he wanted when we were tracking drums and whatnot. He'd come out and look around and either go, yep, that's right. Or, damn, you're stupid. Here, try this over here. Try this over here. And he didn't mince words either. He didn't, I was talking to my buddy Frankie Sullivan the other day, the man who co-wrote Eye of the Tiger. And he and I and Ron had worked together on a couple of records. And on the podcast, he said, there's something about Ron. Just remember, he's not an asshole. He's just demanding. That's the key right there. So when you think about that, because there's a lot of people out there that, musicians are like, oh, Ron Nevison, go away. Yeah, but he's this, he's that. Yeah, but he's brilliant too, because all of these records came to fruition because of him, right? And if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't be there. And I'm honored to say that I worked under him and that I learned a shit ton from him. Ted Templeman, on the other hand, he is responsible for Van Halen and Van Morrison. And, he was in a band way back in the day. I can't remember the name of the band, but I do remember the song. But he was another one that, just listen to Van Halen. Like, Gene Simmons takes credit for finding Van Halen. Okay, that's fine and everything. If that's true, who knows? But at the same time, Ted Templeman is the man who brought him to us, right? Without Ted and his vision on what Van Halen can sound like, we wouldn't be, we wouldn't know Eddie as we know Eddie today. So
it's one of those things where I think a lot of music lovers, the consumers of it, the end set of ears, the fans,
right?
It's hard to imagine what a guy like that would have to do with making Van Halen sound good because it's Eddie Van Halen. And you're the first producer that I've had on the show.
Okay.
So when we were at Rockin' Pod,
right,
I asked Billy Sheehan, the famous bass player,
yes,
what is the bass player's role in the band? It seems like a ridiculous question to ask a guy like Billy Sheehan, but who's going to give me a better answer than a bass player of his caliber?
Exactly.
So I'll pose the question to you. What do you think a producer's role is? Because these guys you're talking about that help to make these iconic albums, yourself included, what's the producer's role in getting that record done?
Oh, God. It goes to, making sure we got the budget, making sure the budget's spent correctly. The admin side, as well as the musical side, as well as taking care of all the technical shit, like, making sure that your tape machine is aligned correctly and that your microphones are working and, things like that, which is an engineer's job as well. But it's a producer's job to also check him and make sure that he's getting the job done correctly and to the best of his ability and how the producer would like it done. So the producer basically oversees the entire project, right? And back in the day, that man was usually on staff at a label, and then we became independent. So I never was on staff at a label yet. You never know. And so, when I was an independent producer, I had a manager, so I'd get called up, my manager would make calls, and next thing I know, I'd be, hey, do you want to work with so-and-so? And I'd be like, hell yeah, let's make a record. Come on. So they'd put, my management would put together the budget and all that. I'd go and take care of the music. So I would go to pre-production where I would keep the band in until I felt like we had enough songs to choose from to make a 10-song or 11-song or 12-song record, like whatever the label wanted, right? And so
And before you start spending the money on the expensive studio. So pre-production is like rehearsals, writing.
Right.
Before you write the big check to get near the good gear.
Exactly. So you're basically in a rehearsal hall, right? And, you got everybody set up around you, maybe, hopefully you have a little recording, something, so you can, you can record what what you're rehearsing so you can listen back. Because one of my big things about rehearsal is that, everybody's trying to play and listen at the same time. Well, you can't do that, be both effective and have an opinion at the end of it. You can, but it's going to be false. But at the same, getting back to the question, I think that, it's really important that the producer make sure that all the songs are happening, not just one or two, and that they can be the best that they can be. And that comes from, experience and with arrangements and, all that kind of stuff. And you have to know, where can you take this song? Is that are those the best chords that can be played for the chorus for the melody? Or is that the best melody for, that can be gotten out of that chorus, for instance. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it. There's a lot of psychology that goes into it, because you're dealing with musicians and you're dealing with artists who, if you fuck with them too much, they're going to turn tail and run on you. But to get the best out of somebody, you have to push that envelope right to the edge. And, sometimes people break down and cry. Sometimes they, scream and yell at you. Sometimes, and that's all good emotion to come out, because that can all be recorded into the music. I had one singer, female, and she had a problem, and she, all of a sudden, it was with her boyfriend. All of a sudden, she started screaming at me. I was like, "What is going on with you?" I'm a very, very chill person, so I sat down with her. And I said, "What's up?" "Oh, my boyfriend, blah blah blah," and we were singing a song that was about hating somebody. And how, and social media and blah, blah, blah. And so I said, you know what, you need to channel all of this emotion right into this song. And I had kept, a few of the takes that she did before that. And then she did, 4 or 5 more for me. They were smoking. And she walked out of the vocal booth, and she just came up and she gave me a big hug. She goes, "Thank you. I can now go home and give my boyfriend a hug." I was like, wow, that's awesome.
How come I don't feel like that with my husband when I walk out of this studio?
Because you don't yell and cry and put enough emotion into it, Carrie.
Obviously not. I'm not emotional enough.
That's right.
Said no one ever about me.
Okay.
By the way. But like when I interview bands a lot,
right.
This is something I can't even count the number of bands I've asked. What it's like to write a song, especially from a super personal place.
Right.
And you go into the studio with a producer.
Right.
I want to hear from your perspective, like, okay, so you got this person that's got all these feelings and stuff, and they wrote this song that they love. How do you tell somebody their baby's ugly when they're paying you? Like, how do you tweak something that's super emotional when you're working for them? Because that's what you're talking about, like
right.
tweaking stuff and driving it. And I couldn't handle that kind of criticism, no matter how nice you were about it.
Well, yes. First of all, you do have to be nice. It's always constructive criticism with me. So one thing that I'm thinking about right now was a time when I had to try and tell somebody just that their baby was ugly, but their baby wasn't really ugly. It was just a little deformed, and so to tell somebody that it is heartbreaking, right? So what I have to make sure of is that the story doesn't get convoluted by trying to mess with it a little bit. You still keep the emotion of it. Once that's intact and you get the trust of the writer, then you can pretty much go anywhere. And my whole thing with them was just the fact that it needed to be personal, yes, but something that everyone can relate to. And they had described something that was so personal that I was having a hard time understanding what they were talking about. And that was their chorus. And I was like, man, so how do we make this more universally accepted? How can you tell me that story and tell me exactly that story, but use some different words that maybe I can relate to something in my life? And they went away pissed off. Fucking asshole guy, producer. Why did we hire him? And but then they came back the next day, and I said, "So what do you got?" And I was, a bit nervous about it, anxious. And they sat down. They said, "Boys, let's play the song, and I'll sing it to Toby." Okay, cool. And we sat down, we played it, and he blew me away. It was completely changed, but the exact thing was still there that he was trying to get across. And, he had help from everybody in the band. And that was a good thing because, you're never alone when you're on a team. Right. And so to be alone in that space would have been pretty scary for anybody, I imagine. But at the same time, he had the support and love of his band members. And, to me, that was the key in getting it done. Right. Because then it went on to be, a pretty actually cool song. And, one that they picked as a single at the end when it was time to put the record out.
That's why I asked you the question, because I knew you'd have a good answer.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to ask you about WAAF I know you're probably sick of hearing all that, but you guys went off the air February 21st, 2020.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah, after 50 years.
yeah. So 50 years, that's crazy. And so what was the last song that was played?
Oh, so let me tell you, you're going to appreciate this because you're a music guy.
Okay.
So in the end, it was me.
Okay.
And I was the assistant program director and the midday host.
Okay.
Mike Shue, who was our afternoon host that had done nights, done middays, was part of the morning show. He had been at the station for over 20 years. And our program director, Joe Calgaro.
Okay.
And we were told on the Tuesday after President's Day that the station, they basically sold the frequency.
Right. Okay.
So at midnight that Friday night, the station frequency was being transferred to a different owner. So we had until then. And so we took Wednesday off the air to kind of formulate a plan because it was I was there 29 years, worked my way up from an intern all the way to the assistant program director.
Okay.
It's the only radio station I had ever worked at. And the bands that got broken out of WAAF, the legends in broadcasting that had come through those halls, you know, everybody from Opie and Anthony and Bob and Zip and Liz Wilde and, you know, Greg Hill, who was our morning guy for 30-something years. Like, the station just had such a legacy. And that was almost the first thing we had to tackle was, how do you choose?
Right.
Right? Like, how do you decide who gets to be the last song? Because we knew our audience was going to scrutinize the choice because they're such passionate rock fans.
Right.
And there's an unlimited amount of rock songs to choose from. So we kind of sat down. We made a list. We had, you know, listeners were making suggestions, people in the halls. And we looked at it pragmatically and we were like, okay, well, first of all, the signal got sold to Christian broadcasting. So we knew we wanted it to be infused with as much Satan as we could find.
I love it.
So we were really, you know, like if you're going to sell a car, like you take it out on one last run, beat it up a little before you sell it, you know? And so we started making lists of stuff, you know, and people made the obvious suggestions like Stairway to Heaven and like all of that kind of stuff. But just a few weeks before the station got sold and we were going off the air, Ozzy had just released a new record.
Oh, okay.
And a few weeks before AAF signed on, Black Sabbath released their first record.
Oh.
So Ozzy was the only artist that had maintained an active music career for literally the entire 50 years that AAF had been on the air.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Because he literally released a record right before we went off the air. And so because of the Satan, because Black Sabbath, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the first Black Sabbath record is kind of the first heavy metal album.
No, you're right. You're right.
We decided that the last song on AAF should be Black Sabbath, Black Sabbath.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Okay.
And we went off the air at midnight and we spent that Thursday and Friday interviewing bands. We brought back employees from as far back as we could go, and we asked everybody to do AAF confessionals.
Uh-oh.
And to say something that they did while they were at AAF that probably would have gotten them fired. But since they were selling the station, we could all get away with it now. So people were telling stories about stuff they stole and things they did in the office and all these crazy stories. And we invited on that Friday night all the old employees. Listeners were bringing cases of booze and bottles of Jack and just leaving them on the steps of the studio.
Nice.
And everybody knew at midnight we were going off the air.
Right.
And we told everybody, you know, all the old employees each got 5 minutes to make their AAF confessional. And so we had hundreds of people that were on the radio just telling all these amazing stories. And then at like 11:45, we kicked everybody out of the studio, and it was just me and Mike Shue and Joe, our program director.
Right.
And we each kind of got, because we were the ones that were still there running the station until the very end.
Okay.
And had a chance to kind of talk about what the station meant to us. And Mike and Joe had said, and you can hear all this audio, like it's all up on YouTube. If you just look up on YouTube, like WAAF Final Night or Final 5 Minutes or whatever, I'm crying like a baby.
Right.
And they had told me that I should say the last thing before and nobody knew the song. We didn't tell anybody what the song was going to be. Only the three of us in that room knew what it was going to be. And so we all thanked everybody. You know, we thanked the listeners, we thanked the bands, we thanked all the staff. We thanked the company for letting us sign the station off, because normally when a station flips or gets sold, they just escort you out by the police, which I can't believe they didn't do with us.
Yeah, right.
And I just told everybody to roll their windows down and hold their head up high and to put their devil horns in the air. And anytime AAF ever did anything, concerts, whatever, you know, like if you went anywhere to a show, an AAF chant would break out everywhere.
Yep.
And so I encouraged the entire audience to chant the AAF chant one last time.
Nice.
And you could hear the hundreds of people in the halls. We had a PA system set up outside. The company got like a police detail because people just started showing up at the studio.
Oh, wow.
And everyone was just screaming AAF at the top of their lungs. And as we faded it out, it went into the rain and the very beginning of Black Sabbath.
Wow.
And then we turned the mics off for the last time. And the three of us just sat in that room. There's pictures of me sitting in there holding my headphones on, just listening to that song, crying because I knew it was over.
Right.
Up at the radio station, we put speakers out there so they could hear us. We are nothing without you, and for as much as you've been telling us that you love us, we love you so much, and you have given us this dream life that we never would have been able to have without you.
And I've never experienced, and I've worked at a few radio stations, I've never experienced the intensity and the passion and just the craziness,
Yeah.
which I love so much about our listeners. They're so passionate, and they would do anything to help us, and they have.
Yeah.
They've done a lot to help us help other people, and
So
we'll
just-
eternally be grateful for
Just
that.
know that Monday when you're missing us, we're missing you.
Yeah.
You guys need to know that. And
Yeah.
we asked for a lot of suggestions about what our final song should be. And we got thousands of responses.
Thousands. Yeah.
And it's a lot of debate. It's a heavy burden to try and decide what is going to send WAAF out after 50 years. How do you pick one song?
Well, we went back to the year we started, 1970, when we became an FM rock station. And an artist who's been a core artist for us, a staple in our playlist that whole time.
And an album and a song that is credited with basically being the first heavy metal album
Right.
and the first heavy metal band.
Also turning 50,
Yeah.
just like us.
And an artist that's still out there doing it right now, fighting through everything, tooth and nail, trying to hold on to that one last moment, that one last show, that one last everything. And so we hope that you're happy with what we picked, because we didn't think there was another song, especially to where we're going at midnight on 107.3.
Yes. Yes, it's an excellent song for the segue into the new format. It was handcrafted, especially chosen for that. So,
So, you know what we've been saying? WAAF, the family, head up, shoulders back, horns up. We're going out proud because we were all part of something special.
we were. It was awesome.
And we love you so much.
We do. We love you guys, and we thank you so much for all the support.
There's only one way to go.
Yeah.
There's only one way to do it.
Loud,
In your face,
evil.
groundbreaking, influential,
And cheap, as we learned.
yeah, cheap and fast.
Cheap and fast.
And if you're going to invent a genre of music and inspire generations, to all of the bands that have been inspired because of this band and this album, to everybody that has called us, every band we've ever played, every employee we've ever had, everybody that's ever listened to this radio station, this is for you. We love you
We love you.
so much.
And thank you.
Thank you for everything. And one last time, baby, wherever you are, roll your windows down.
Crank it up!
AAF! 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 AAF!
And to this day, when I hear that song, it like ruined that song for me. But then you know how like you have specific memories that are associated with specific songs, which is what's great about music.
Oh yeah.
That song will
Absolutely.
always be the soundtrack to like one of the worst days of my life and also one of the greatest gifts because it was such an honor. Like I attribute it to like being there to hold someone's hand as they die. Like it would have been so unceremoniously sad if they had just pulled the plug on the thing. And like, so them letting us make the deal out of it and pay the tribute to the station that it deserved. So when I hear that song, it literally still makes me cry a year and a half later.
Yeah, no. I would imagine so. It's that emotion that you don't have, remember?
Yeah. And we knew that people were going to scrutinize the choice. And we
Sure.
wanted to make sure, I mean, we were three music heads.
Right.
And it was the only song all three of us agreed on.
Okay.
And not one person came to us and said, we wish you had chosen another song. And it wasn't the obvious choice.
Right. Right. I don't know if I would have chosen that song, but man, to have,
But it was perfect.
it is perfect because, 50 years and pretty much Black Sabbath was the only band then and the only band when you went off the air. Like, come on. It doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, Ozzy had his solo stuff and had released that last album as a solo artist, but Ozzy was there. He was the timeline, the soundtrack, literally for AAF from its very first day to its very last day, because his last song, I mean, songs off that last record were in active rotation.
Right.
On our last day. Like, he was that artist that had stood the test of time for all 50 years.
Right.
It was an obvious choice in hindsight. But when we were sitting in the room trying to decide what it should be, I mean, we were talking about like Rain and Blood and, trying to get sentimental with like other stuff. I mean, it's a huge responsibility. It's the first thing you asked about AF. Like, what's the last song you played? It's like that obvious thing. Like, there had to have been. You're not just going to play whatever showed up on the list next. Like, you got to put thought into that shit.
Oh, exactly.
So I'm very proud of the choice.
And I'm very proud of you for making that choice because, man, that's a great song. It's a great band. And, there's nobody more deserving of each other than AAF and Black Sabbath. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And there was also this fear of the unknown because, like, for me, I had been there since I was 18 years old.
Okay.
I had never worked anywhere else in radio. Like, so that whole, that line about what is this that stands before me, like that fear of the unknown, that taking that step, like, I don't know what's going on right in front of me. That was very real for all of us because none of us knew what we were going to do the next day when we woke up. We all were out of a job. Right.
Exactly. So that brings me to my next question, which is, what are you doing now that you are not there anymore, or it's not even there for you?
So the week after, and this was obviously before COVID was what we all know it to be now.
Right.
At the time, it was a story about what was going on in Wuhan, China, and maybe there was a case or two in the U.S., but it was not, the third week of February of 2020 was not. So the following week, I was supposed to already have gone to this rock radio convention in Vegas.
Okay.
And I was slated to go there and represent WAAF at this convention.
Sure.
And it was already paid for. So my boss was like, it's still paid for. Go find a job. So I had to get a new email address and print up business cards, and I flew to Vegas. And I went to this rock radio convention, and I ended up on a panel with all these other female rock programmers that were all at these incredibly influential stations around the country. And I was the only one that had just gotten fired.
Okay.
And it's like I was living everyone else in the room's worst nightmare, right? Because rock radio, you know, you just never know if the company's going to decide we can make more money with sports talk or politics or top 40 or country or whatever.
Right.
And I was getting asked all these like post-mortem questions. Like I was being asked to do an autopsy on the body because they were all trying to learn from me what they could do to avoid. And
Okay.
I was pretty bitter, you know, and pretty pissed off. And I'm still angry about it, but I've come to that acceptance part of the stages of grief, you know?
Sure.
And so then when I got back from Vegas, now we're talking about March 1st,
Okay.
I had some job interviews and then COVID hit before I could land a new job.
All right.
And I was like, oh boy, this isn't going to be good. And because I had been at AAF so long, I had never had the opportunity to, like, I call it get appraised, find out what you're worth in the open market because I was under contract, you know? So when COVID started to become a thing, I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to need a place to work.
Right.
And if I'm going to need a place to work, I need to build a studio. And if I'm going to build a studio, it's going to take time, construction, gear. I'm going to need to bring in some sound engineers and some experts. All of those things are going to cost me money. So I needed a company because now I'm thinking logically going, you know, I got to write this stuff off.
Sure.
Business expense. I got to start a company.
That's
so
right.
I launched a company, built my studio, MCHQ, which you see, and hired a graphic designer, started building my website, and was like, I don't know, you know, at this point, radio stations are furloughing employees, laying people off. COVID is now full on. We're all locked down. I'm in the Northeast, which got hit first.
Right.
And so I said, okay, well, you know, there's no rock station breaking artists in the Northeast anymore. And I'm lucky enough to have all the relationships with the bands and the people in the industry like yourself. And I want to be able to maintain those things. So I was like, well, I got a studio. I want to be able to do what I can do in my own control. So I launched the Mistress Carrie podcast. I had started a video streaming show that I still do to this day on my Facebook page and my YouTube channel called Cocktails in the War Room that I do every Tuesday night at 8:30.
Okay.
And I started doing that stuff and launched the podcast, and it found an audience right away, which I couldn't believe. And the video show had an audience, and we're riding out this pandemic. I mean, the world, who could have predicted this, right?
Right.
And then I launched, then I expanded the podcast in October of last year. I launched the website and my online store in December. Got through the new year, started 2021, and then in May, I got hired by Westwood One and Cumulus Broadcasting.
Oh, cool.
And I'm back on the radio.
Congratulations.
And so, thank you. So I work for Westwood One, and I also work for Cumulus Broadcasting, working on a station in Massachusetts too. So back on the radio, podcast business, website, all of it. Now I'm busier than yeah, but I'm busier than I ever thought I would be. And it's really weird because I was so used to being part of a team, right? And working at a radio station. Like you were talking about, you're never alone when you're part of a team.
That's right.
I wasn't in a band, but I was in a gang at AAF. There were all of us, and we would brainstorm ideas and work on things together. And having to do all of it myself, it's scary, especially when you're doing it all during a pandemic. And
for sure.
I've been very fortunate that the podcast is going really well. Thank God I built the studio. Having the studio is what got me back on the radio because I had a place to work.
Right.
Because radio stations sent everybody home to work remote because they couldn't be in the studio because of COVID.
Right. And
it's been really good.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Scary, but good.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm proud of you for, you know, making the effort to keep Mistress Carrie alive because we love you. And, you know, the world would not be the same without your voice and your face out there.
Thank you. It was it was one of those things where I was like, I don't know what else to do. Right? This is what I've been doing my whole career, my whole adult life. And there was this void. Like, how can I keep that AAF family that, bands know when you come through this part of the country that there's these rabid rock fans here. And there's this, even if the bands aren't from Boston, so many bands from out of Boston broke in Boston because of AAF and because of the passion of the fans here.
Right.
And I was like, growing up a fan of AAF before I ever worked there, I was like, well, where do we all go now?
Right.
We don't have a home anymore.
Exactly.
So my motivation in the beginning was just to give us all a place where we could still go and where I could, keep people in touch with the artists they love, but then introduce them to artists that I think they're going to love, that are new.
Right.
And to be able to do that. And so with the podcast, I've been able to interview everybody from, like Dan Murphy from this band, All Good Things, who's just getting ready to release their first record, to, Nancy Wilson of the aforementioned Heart. And it's like, there's this whole spectrum of people in there, Alice Cooper and, Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick. But then I'm interviewing Morgan Rose from Seven Dust and, all of these guys that I've known for years. And it's been great.
So who was one of your favorite bands to ever interview?
On the podcast or ever?
Ever.
I mean, I always loved talking to Ozzy just because you never know. Like, you talk about that whole fly by the seat of your pants thing that we started talking about at the beginning.
Yeah.
There's very few people that give you more of that sensation than talking to Ozzy because you just don't know what he's going to say.
Oh, amen.
But, I mean, I always prided myself on like trying to do something a little different, a little more fun. So, like I had the Damage Plan guys come in,
right?
When Dimebag and Vinny were alive and they were getting ready to release that first Damage Plan record. And I went to the toy store and got all these little, battery powered little kid instruments. And there's
cool.
Vinny, doing a drum solo on a little kid's drum set, and Dimebag Darrell shredding on this Wiggles guitar, and just ridiculous stuff like that. Joe Satriani came in and gave me a guitar lesson.
Sweet.
And I have long fingernails, and he was like, well, your fingernails are going to keep you from being able to play guitar. And I was like, Joe, the fingernails are not what's keeping me from playing guitar, man. I hate to tell you, I could cut them off right now and still not be able to play guitar. Steven Tyler came in and I still have it. It's on the shelf actually right up there behind me. I bought these 2 first act harmonicas that are like my first harmonica that are like Toys R Us.
Yep.
And I opened them in front of him so he could see that a harmonica, that it had never been played, because harmonicas are one of those things where it's like, even pre-COVID, like it's pretty intimate. You're sucking and blowing all over the thing. And I asked him to give me a harmonica lesson. Okay. And he taught me like the bass line of the, there's great audio of him telling me like suck in and like in, out, in, out. And then he took this little kid's harmonica and just slayed a solo over my bass line.
Oh, nice.
And it was one of the craziest things because I was like, I can't believe I'm playing harmonica with Steven Tyler right now. And I have the audio, and it's like, I always tried to do those kinds of things to like make it fun for them and try to do something that they had never done before and ask questions that they had never been asked before. Because as you're very well aware, like you do enough interviews after a while, you get asked the same questions over and over.
Right, exactly.
It's not fun anymore. And so the things that I remember the most were always when we were doing goofy, funny things.
Right, me too. Those are always the best times when you're just having fun. Like when we were in the farm or at the farm. And I was producing Seven Dust, and man, there's some funny stuff that happened up there, I tell you, that album, talking about how songs are attached to memories and stuff. Right. That album for me represents so many good times. So like, here's my perspective, because you're holed up in the recording studio with Seven Dust. The studio is Longview Farm, so you're out in the middle of nowhere. All the stores, everything closed at like 7, 8 o'clock at night. It's a horse farm in the middle of nowhere. And I'm about a half hour away. Yep. And I was on the air till midnight, and I had interns and whatever. And you guys would call me, somebody in the band, somebody would call me every night
and give a shopping list to my interns of what you guys needed at the liquor store, if you wanted pizzas, what you needed at the grocery store, snacks, cigarettes, like whatever it was.
Right.
My interns would then go out with my credit card, buy all of this stuff, and then I'd get off the air at midnight, drive the half hour to Longview Farms, where you guys were just getting started at work, basically, because you guys were working all night.
Right.
And I would show up there like, you know, Bobby Fleckman, the hostess with the mostest, with the ding-dongs and the cigarettes and the liquor and the booze. And I would get to sit there, and it was a front row seat for me to watch you guys make that record.
Right, exactly.
Which was fascinating for me.
Cheap price to pay, right?
Yeah. I mean, they repaid me for all that stuff. I would have gone broke if I bought Seven Dust groceries every night. And then you guys would all get ready to go to bed at like 7 a.m.
Yep. We did.
And I would go home and go to bed and get up and do it all over again the next day.
Right, exactly. And I remember there were a few nights when we came in, we traveled that half an hour, and we met you at, you know, out somewhere because, you know, we needed to get off the farm. We had... You
guys were like 20, 25 minutes from Worcester,
right,
which had clubs. And so you guys would come into town and we'd meet up at shows just to get out of the house. And
exactly. There were a few of those nights. You know, I remember one night in particular that we got escorted home by the Massachusetts State Police. And thank you very much, Carrie, because you, if I remember correctly, you set that all up so that we didn't get busted. So
you're
that
welcome.
was some fucking funny times.
I have always had an incredible relationship with the first responder and military community.
Right.
And it's always been my experience that they're such passionate rock fans. And we were at that show, and there's always police details and stuff. And I was like, guys, these guys need to get back. They don't have cars. They're here recording a record, and the troopers were like, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Like, I think the troopers like wanted autographs and stuff.
They did.
Yeah. And you guys were like, whatever. And the guys from Seven Dust were like, can we turn the lights on? Can we blare the sirens? Like, it was hilarious.
We were just like a bunch of little kids. You know, and then we did pull up to the farm, and I remember 2 or 3 cop cars, and the lights were going. And so, you know, when we got there, Bonnie, the owner, came out and, what's wrong? What happened? What did they do? You know, and said one of the officers, oh, it's okay, man. We're just driving them home. Everybody's too drunk to talk. Good night. And we went to the
Here's
barn.
Seven Dust. Exactly. Here you go.
It was hilarious.
Did you go to the baseball game with us?
I don't think so.
We took, because you know how big of a Yankees fan Morgan is, and I got tickets to the Red Sox game, and we got a van, and I drove a bunch of them, and Morgan comes out in all his Yankee shit. And we're sitting in the bleachers, like the cheap seats at Fenway. I'm like, dude, don't wear your Yankees shit to Fenway. It wasn't even a Yankees game. And he was like, I'm wearing this stuff. And I was like, please don't. Like, and he took the jersey up, but he wore the hat, but he wore it backwards.
Okay.
And he was walking down the bleachers to go underneath the bleachers where the concessions were. And it was his turn to like buy the round of drinks.
Okay.
And this guy up behind us who was like wasted, didn't even know who it was. Didn't know it was Morgan.
Right.
And just screams down, hey, Yankees fan, get up here so I can fuck you in the ass. And Morgan looked at me like, what the fuck? I was like, that's what you get for wearing Yankees gear to Fenway, dude. What are you doing?
That's fucking precious.
Like, there's so many. Like, I had never heard of Skunkin' Nancy before until Skin came in to sing on that song.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, her voice. I had never heard of her before because they were this huge band in Europe, but they weren't big in the States.
Yep.
And I remember hearing her sing Licking Cream off that record and was like, where did her voice come from?
Isn't that beautiful? Like,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And they're still a band. So anybody that's listening to this, if you don't know who Skunkin' Nancy is, just Google it or go listen to Home. That's the girl singing with LeJean on Licking Cream. She hits these notes. It doesn't make any sense. And then Chino's on that record.
Yep.
Because he did Bender on that record, and I was there when they were recording that too. So was Ian Barrett.
Exactly.
It was from AAF's TV show.
That's right. And I all of those, I mean, a lot of that stuff was written in the studio. So, you know, especially Licking Cream, right? Because I remember sending her and LeJean down to the, to the room down there. Okay, you guys go write this. We're going to work on something else. And, let's see what you come up with. And we only had limited time. And I remember that it was, we were hard pressed to get what we got. But I'm very proud of what we got because it certainly was a great representation of that song. And both.
It's one of my favorites off the record.
Talents. Say again?
It's one of my favorites off the record.
Me too. But, the opening track just slays me every time, though.
Yeah.
It's just, talk about my music. There's my music right there. Just, something that like makes me digs deep into my soul and makes me emotional. You know what I mean? And can elicit an emotional response. That's my music.
And that's a perfect example of one of those bands that's not from Boston, but broke out of Boston, and we claimed them as ours. And they always, to this day, have a home in the Northeast, even though they're the good old Southern boys that they are, Right, exactly. So you mentioned Westwood One earlier, and your new gig. So is that, are they a satellite thing now, or are they terrestrial radio? And no, so Westwood One is a big player in like radio syndication and
okay.
So they do a lot of work with like the NFL and they carry a lot of big not satellite in like a Sirius XM satellite way, but carrying big events and simulcasting and syndicating that kind of content to terrestrial radio stations around the country. And Westwood One also supplies a lot of the content for the American Forces Network, which is the TV and radio that the troops hear around the world. And so to be affiliated with a company like that and to be in their kind of arsenal and stable of DJs, I can only imagine what's going to be possible for me in the future. I mean, when they came calling earlier this year, I was like, oh my God, like it's Westwood One.
Right, exactly.
It's huge. It's been amazing to be part of this team, and because they're so huge in the world of broadcasting, I don't know what's going to be possible with my career with them. But I'm excited. I mean, it's only been a few months.
I would be too. I mean, that's, it's a great opportunity because they're a global company, and so now, Mistress Carrie goes global, as it were.
Slowly trying to take over the world, Toby, little by little.
That a girl. I'm proud of you. And now I'd like to thank our sponsor, TAUMMHOMS, which is a natural sleep and sound healing portal, helping people globally to get to sleep faster and stay asleep longer. And you can find this piece of gold at TAUMMHOMS.com. That's www.TAUMMHOMS.com. Well, most of all, a big thank you to all of you who stream, download, watch, and support My Right Stuff. And please keep spreading the word. I really, really appreciate it. Also, we now have a merch store that you can pick up some snazzy merch for those bodies. Go to myrightstuff.com and click on the store tab. And don't forget to tag us in any photos with our merch so we can give you a live shout out in an episode. Well, I also want to thank our whole My Right Stuff crew for making this podcast possible every week. This has been another exciting episode of My Right Stuff. Be sure to tune in next week and every week for yet another adventurous and informative episode. Please remember to subscribe on YouTube so you never miss an episode, and I hear it will also give you 10 years good luck. Ring that bell. I'm your host, Lord Toby Wright, and remember to listen loud, play hard, and keep reaching for your dreams. Good night.
Thank you for watching My Right Stuff. This episode was brought to you by TAUMMHOMS, a natural sleep and sound healing portal available globally at www.taumms.com. That's www.taummmhoms.com.